That's it. December 3rd, 2025. We are in the fourth year, day 283, since the full-scale invasion began. Welcome to the Daily Situation Report. Before we discuss Ukraine, let me briefly ask you something. Do you actually feel it already? Do you feel that the airspace above your heads has become just a little bit safer? Germany is now deploying its new Arrow 3 interceptor systems. At the same time, this is the first deployment of the exo-atmospheric missile defense system outside of Israel. The procurement costs amount to around 3.6 billion United States dollars, which actually isn't that expensive compared to other systems. Arrow 3 is designed to detect and destroy incoming ballistic missiles far outside the atmosphere, up to low Earth orbit. In emergencies, it can target objects in low Earth orbit. With its introduction, the Bundeswehr closes a key air and missile defense gap and expands protection for much of the airspace. We may lack nuclear weapons, sufficient ammunition, and especially enough soldiers. And among the population, the wake-up call or the outcry that we should invest more in this still doesn't really exist. But we are actually the first and so far the only country in Europe that is able to intercept missiles in space. However, what needs to be said is that, of course, this is not enough. Attacked by drones, missiles, and cruise missiles, and they have more active measures than we do. So if we ever find ourselves in a war, what we currently have is by far not enough to even take away their illusion of a secure airspace. Skirmishes are again reported near Kupiansk. Ukrainians keep launching offensives to drive Russians from the city center. Several skirmishes are being reported, especially on the western side of the city. The Ukrainians are trying to push the Russians back to the water boundary, where the 116th Motorized Rifle Brigade is defending. The attacks are quite recent. There are already initial reports that the Ukrainians have been able to recapture some sections, but also statements that are meant to refute this. I'm going to wait for one or two more reports until the fog of war has cleared a bit. And there are a few new pieces of information about the fighting here and maybe also about its outcome, so that we can take a look at this sector and see how the attack went and how its success can be assessed. The Russian oil depot in the Tambov region was hit by a drone and is burning. It's blazing. By the way, if you haven't noticed, for about 2 years, the Russians haven't been trying to put out oil depot fires after attacks. Fire departments usually lack equipment, and due to the war, almost nothing is being bought anymore. 40% of the state budget will go directly to the war next year. This shows there are concerns beyond burning depots, though they still cause financial losses, especially for oil companies now at the peak of their suffering. According to Euronews, the Trump envoys Steve Witkow and Jared Kushner have canceled their planned meeting with Zelensky at short notice. Kremlin sources said that both wanted to return directly to Washington after the talks with Putin without conducting a follow-up with the Ukrainian side. These optics are politically disastrous, especially if you only listen to Moscow and don't reinforce the other side. Letting them control the narrative weakens Kiev's position and undermines mediation credibility. For Russian propaganda, this is more like a gift because now they can claim that the United States listens to them and has no one else to talk to. For Europe, this is a warning. Security and aid decisions must not depend on public relations issues, but on the situation at the front and the resilience in Ukraine. The cancellation of the meeting between Witkow and Kushner with Zelensky could also be interpreted differently, because they may have also left the Kremlin without accomplishing anything, without being able to tell Zelensky anything at all, since they didn't manage to communicate or work out anything, since talks with the Russians once again failed, which is actually very likely. Either way, from the United States perspective, they shouldn't allow the Russians to maintain control over the interpretation of their actions. Feel free to leave a free subscription if you haven't done so yet. This way, you continue to support the quality of the videos. Thank you very much for that. The Third Army Corps denies reports of an alleged Russian breakthrough at Liman. Earlier, the Russian Chief of General Staff informed Putin of advances in the 63rd and 60th sectors. Brigade forced a gap. But on the ground, it's different. Russian forces are still trying to enter the city. It was reported that they should already be inside the city, here, while the front line runs roughly here. So approximately. Now we can measure it out. From the center of town, it's about 11 kilometers to the east. Here, it's also 11 kilometers, and up here it's almost 12.5 kilometers. No matter which way I go, it's basically impossible. Even if we say that from the front line, the Russians, let's say, have a gray zone up to halfway, so 50%. I'm still about 6 kilometers away in the next area, where the Russians could be, but definitely not in the city. There are ongoing attacks by small groups trying to get in here. Also, try to bypass the outskirts, such as villages near Tversky, the pier, or up here as well. However, there is nothing that has entered the city so far. A Russian soldier explained how Ukrainians recently got Russian position data. He thanks Russian military correspondent Timo Yamakov, who shared his side's positions on Telegram. This let the Ukrainians track and capture them as prisoners of war, saving them from death. Then he said that he should continue to publish positions in order to save other soldiers from death as well. That's probably a statement the Ukrainians made him say. I think he won't publish any more positions in the future. Still, the situation is dynamic, and there's no confirmed capture. On the situation map, it also looks different than what the Russians are claiming again, which you can see very clearly here. At Pokrovsk, it looks like this. The Russians also captured the last piece in the southern sector, which I marked here some time ago. Do you remember this dashed line down here? That's the southern sector in red, and up here is the northern one in blue. It runs exactly along the railway track, which cuts through the city here. The Russians were able to almost completely dominate this last stretch here. Dominating in this case means that there is predominantly Russian control here. Of course, there are always occasional skirmishes, especially here near the contact line. However, we can assume that the Ukrainian presence here in the southern sector is now almost non-existent. They are mostly up here in the northern sector, where the first skirmishes are already happening, especially near the train station. But what we can state for the moment is that the south of the city is, as much as possible, under Russian control. Up here at the northern ramparts, fighting is already taking place. Here is the road leading out of the city, but you can't get out here anymore. The Ukrainians, who are still here at Myrnarad, as well as the Ukrainians who are still in the northern part of the city, they will most likely leave the city via this route here and then turn left to head out towards Rizhna. And of course, the road is heavily guarded by the Russians. Not physically, but with drones. At the red pushpin, we've already seen what I'd call a vehicle graveyard located right here. That means it's pretty hard to get out of the city, even if there's still an open route out of the pocket here. But of course, that's to be expected. That's all something you could have thought of beforehand. And maybe you did think about it, but you accepted the risk. For reasons I can't mention here, since I'm not sitting in the Ukrainian General Staff, Australian Broadcasting Corporation reports Australia is considering giving decommissioned Eurocopter Tiger AHAs to Ukraine. This concerns up to 22 helicopters that Kiev has already shown interest in. The Tiger is also used in Germany, France, and Spain, making training, spare parts, and maintenance easier. If Canberra agrees, major changes and clarification on supplied armament would be needed before the transfer. Politically, it would be significant. Australia is replacing the Tiger with the attack helicopter 64E to better utilize their Apache fleet. And Ukraine would thus also receive an additional means for armed reconnaissance. Hunting armored vehicles in Ukraine is another Western helicopter. Not bad at all. Special thanks to all Goy Krug members and especially Lieutenant Colonel Renike. As always, thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, and comment. See you at the next Situation Report.